The European country with the highest rate of convicted minors is not a nation marked by violence and disorder, but one of the most peaceful and orderly places on the planet. Other countries, on the other hand, are experiencing an unprecedented explosion of youth violence. This is not an opinion, but the result that emerges from cross-referencing official Eurostat data. In this video, we will reveal the complete ranking of the 10 countries with the highest rates of convicted minors. And be careful, we are not necessarily talking about teenagers who ended up in prison, but about under 18s who received a sentence. But we will go further. We will reveal the true causes of this youth crime and the profile of minors committing offences in Europe. Our goal is by no means to condemn these young people, who, as we will see, are often victims rather than perpetrators, but rather to reflect together on where, as adults, we are leading our youth. Let us clarify that Eurostat has not classified all European countries, but only those you see here. Welcome to Amazing Europe. Number 10. Poland. And what if we told you that the reason Poland is on this list is not because it punishes its youngsters, but because it tries to save them too much? It may sound like a contradiction, but the truth lies in a single word of its legal system: demoralization. Polish law allows a judge to intervene not only for a crime, but also for behaviours such as skipping school or running away from home. Attitudes that elsewhere would be managed by social services can in Poland open a court case, creating a true statistical funnel. And this happens despite a crucial background fact: youth crime is dropping drastically, with court cases more than halved in the last decade. So who are these young people? Statistics outline a clear profile that has little to do with nationality, but almost exclusively with social environment. In more than 70% of cases, minors come from families affected by alcoholism and severe economic problems. Crimes are often linked to poverty, with thefts and robberies accounting for over 65% of the total, concentrated in urban and industrial areas such as Silesia and the Warsaw region. Since almost every intervention, even the mildest, is formalized by a judge, it is recorded as a sentence. A simple verbal warning becomes official data for the statistics. The numbers confirm it. Over 80% of the convictions are in fact non-custodial educational measures. The most severe measure, the equivalent of a juvenile prison, concerns less than 5% of cases. It is this hyper-protective legal system, designed to prevent, that generates the figure placing Poland in this ranking, a rate of 153.95 convicted minors per 100,000. Number 9. Germany. When you think of Germany, you imagine order and stability. And indeed, this country too, for almost 15 years, has seen a steady decline in youth crime. But the most recent statistics have shone a spotlight on an internal dynamic that analysts describe as truly worrying. Let's take it step by step. The offences that bring minors before a judge are mainly thefts, which make up about 1/3 of the total, and bodily injuries, 18%. Geographically, the phenomenon is concentrated in large city-states such as Berlin and Hamburg, much less in wealthy Bavaria and in rural areas. But it is when analysing the origin of suspects that the most shocking figure emerges, the one that alarms experts. According to official police data, the number of non-German minor suspects increased by 42.7% in just 1 year. Although they are a minority, they account for almost half of all suspects in serious crimes such as theft and robbery. It is essential, however, to put this number into context. German criminological reports themselves emphasize that the root of the problem is not ethnic, but socio-economic, a complex mix of migration-related trauma, precarious living conditions, and lack of opportunities. What do you think about this situation? Despite this statistical turbulence, the German judicial system remains anchored to its principle: education before punishment. About 75% of proceedings are dismissed without trial, while detention is reserved for only 5 to 7% of the most serious cases. It is this complex balance between an educational approach and new social tensions that places Germany in 9th place, with a rate of 155.09 convicted minors per 100,000. Number 8. Spain. Did you know that in Spain, almost 1 in 10 juvenile offences is violence committed by a child against their own parents? This shocking figure is only the tip of the iceberg of a complex situation that goes far beyond the country's image of sun and relaxation. Unlike Poland and Germany, here the figures are not decreasing, but with ups and downs, they have remained fairly stable for several years. The most common crimes are thefts, which make up about 40% of the total, and injuries caused by fights with a share of 15%. But it is the rise in child-to-parent violence that worries experts. Physical and psychological aggression against parents is a growing social emergency. Geographically, the phenomenon of youth crime is concentrated in the metropolises of Madrid and Barcelona, where another highly publicised problem is that of violent youth gangs, the so-called bandas latinas. Although they are a minority, their impact on the perception of security is enormous. Statistics show that most identified members have a migrant background, especially from Morocco. Experts, however, specify that this type of crime is not linked to ethnic factors, but to social exclusion and poverty. What do you think about such a complex situation? Despite these tensions, the Spanish judicial system remains one of the most progressive in Europe. Over 80% of sentences involve alternative measures such as probation. Confinement in a closed centre is reserved for less than 10% of cases. It is this mix between an educational approach and new social emergencies that places Spain in 8th place, with a rate of 156.06 convicted minors per 100,000. Number 7. Portugal. Did you know that in Portugal a child can be brought before a judge as early as the age of 12? This threshold for intervention, one of the lowest in Europe, is the first clue to understanding why the country ranks so high in this list. Statistics show a very concentrated criminal phenomenon. More than half of the offences are thefts and robberies, often committed in groups, followed by physical assaults. Geographically, the problem erupts almost entirely in the outskirts of the two main cities. The district of Lisbon alone accounts for nearly 40% of all national cases. It is in these disadvantaged neighbourhoods that the issue of youth gangs is concentrated. Statistics indicate a strong presence of young people with a migrant background, especially from Portuguese-speaking African countries and, more recently, from Brazil. But Portuguese experts also insist on one key point. The over-representation of youths with a migrant background does not mean that their origin is the cause of the problem. The real cause, they say, is not ethnic, but socio-economic. In other words, it is not being born elsewhere that makes a young person more likely to offend, but the living conditions in which a disproportionate number of them are forced to grow up once in Portugal. Poverty concentrated in the suburbs, school dropout, and deep social exclusion. These causes lead to a rate of 164.19 convicted minors per 100,000 in Portugal. Despite this reality, the educational philosophy of the system prevails clearly. Over 90% of sentences are alternative measures, such as being accompanied by an educator. Imprisonment is a rare option, reserved for less than 5% of cases. Number 6. Sweden. Sweden is changing, and not for the better. Unlike other countries, here the rate of youth crime is not improving. The reason has a very specific name: youth gangs. This phenomenon dominates the statistics. Minors are suspected in almost 40% of all robberies, often humiliation robberies aimed at terrorizing the victim. This violence is directly linked to the control of the drug market, which has triggered a wave of shootings and explosions in broad daylight at a level never seen before in Europe. But the most shocking fact is the recruitment of children under 15, the minimum age for prosecution, used by gangs as couriers, soldiers, or even killers, precisely because they know they will not end up in prison. This problem is hyper-concentrated in the urban ghettos of Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Malmö, where the state itself admits it has lost part of its control. It is in these neighbourhoods, marked by deep social segregation and poverty, that crime feeds itself, disproportionately involving young people with a migrant background. For decades, Sweden has addressed the issue with an approach based on care rather than punishment, investing enormous sums in high-security centres managed by social services. up to €800 per day for each minor. Yet, the model has proved a failure. The juvenile recidivism rate is 75%, much higher than that of adult criminals. Faced with this reality, the government is abandoning its historic social policy to introduce actual youth prisons, which will be managed by the same authority as adult prisons. This is the attempt to counter the rate of 215.79 convicted minors per 100,000. Number 5. France. Did you know that during the violent riots that set France on fire in the summer of 2023, 1/3 of all those arrested were minors? This explosive figure is the perfect snapshot of a country whose juvenile justice statistics do not follow a steady line, but rather erupt intermittently, driven by deep and unresolved social fractures. Youth crime here is an almost exclusively urban phenomenon. More than 40% of offences are thefts and robberies, to which we must add the endemic violence of the suburbs and the recruitment of minors for drug trafficking. The problem is massively concentrated in the outskirts of Paris, Marseille and Lyon. It is here that the most debated figure in France emerges, an overwhelming overrepresentation of young people with a migrant background. Unlike other countries, this is not about newcomers, but largely about second and third generation youths with origins in the Maghreb and sub-Saharan Africa. French experts are clear. This is the result of decades of failed integration, which has created ghettos marked by unemployment, school dropout, and a strong sense of exclusion. What do you think of this explosive situation? In any case, the French legal system continues to prioritise education. Most sentences are alternative measures, while detention in closed centres applies only to 10 to 15% of the most serious cases. It is this constant tension between suburban uprisings and a system that seeks to educate that places France in 5th position, with a rate of 215.99 convicted minors per 100,000. Number 4. United Kingdom. Did you know that in the United Kingdom, the number of young people entering a courtroom for the first time has collapsed by 82% in 10 years? This incredible achievement, the result of a deliberate policy aimed at handling minor offences outside the judicial system, hides a much darker reality. It is a two-speed system. On the one hand, it empties the courtrooms, but on the other, it fails to stop a wave of serious violence that terrorises its cities. While petty thefts and vandalism are sharply declining, the country is facing a national emergency that dominates the news: knife violence, which has increased by 70% in the last decade. The data show that the young people who now appear in court have committed much more serious crimes than in the past. Geographically, the problem is exploding in London, but also in Birmingham and Manchester. Unlike other countries, British statistics report ethnicity, and the numbers are shocking. Black youths, while making up only 4% of the population, account for more than 20% of detained minors. The same government reports stress that this is not a racial issue, but the result of deep structural inequalities, poverty, and social exclusion in the most deprived neighbourhoods. Despite the preventive approach, sentences for violent crimes are becoming harsher. Detention, which applies to about 5% of convictions, is on the rise for the most serious offences. It is this unique mix between prevention for minor crimes and repression for violent ones that explains the historically high position of the United Kingdom, with a rate of 238.62 convicted minors per 100,000. Number 3. Denmark. In this country, a second-generation immigrant youth is up to 4 times more likely to be convicted of a violent crime compared to a peer of Danish origin. This shocking statistic is the key to understanding why the small and wealthy Scandinavian nation takes a surprising bronze medal in this ranking. The Danish system is designed for a quick response and is highly focused. Criminal responsibility starts at the age of 15, so the very high conviction rate is concentrated within a very narrow age group, between 15 and 17 years old. Unlike in other countries, here, violent crimes such as assaults and threats statistically outnumber thefts. The problem exploded with the rise of youth gangs to the point that the government had to introduce special laws, the so-called gang packages, which double penalties in specific conflict zones. As official data confirm, This phenomenon is almost entirely concentrated in areas that the government itself defines as ghettos or parallel societies, neighbourhoods marked by high unemployment and segregation. Once again, experts emphasise that the root of the problem is not ethnic but social exclusion. What do you think about a government that officially labels some areas of its own country as ghettos? Despite this, the system prioritises rehabilitation. About 60% of sentences are suspended convictions tied to educational programs. Detention applies in 15 to 20% of cases, the highest percentage among the countries seen so far. In 2023, Denmark recorded a rate of 351.20 convicted minors per 100,000. Number 2, Finland. In Finland, the country the UN has called the happiest in the world, the number of robberies committed by children under the age of 15 has doubled in record time. This shocking statistic is the first sign that the Nordic idyll hides a reality of youth violence that is growing rapidly and alarmingly. After years of calm, Finnish statistics have registered a surge in violent crimes, particularly robberies and group assaults, often without any apparent reason. The phenomenon is geographically hyper-concentrated in the most disadvantaged suburbs of the Helsinki metropolitan area. It is in these neighbourhoods that a much-debated figure emerges: a massive over-representation of youths with migrant backgrounds, especially from the Middle East and North Africa, in violent crime statistics. But once again, experts insist that the cause is not ethnic, but a problem of deep social segregation. Growing up in contexts of poverty, with few prospects and a strong sense of alienation, is the real engine of crime. What do you think about this sudden change in a country long considered so safe? Despite this new wave of violence, the Finnish legal system remains one of the least punitive in Europe. The overwhelming majority of cases end with alternative measures such as mediation or supervision programs. Actual imprisonment is exceptionally rare, reserved for less than 1% of the most serious cases. It is this clash between a soft system and hard violence that places Finland in second place, with a staggering rate of 463.40 convicted minors per 100,000. Before revealing the unexpected number 1, if you found this video informative, we kindly ask you to support our project with a like, by subscribing to the channel, and by clicking the bell so you will not miss our new videos. And we remind you that if you want to know the 10 countries with the most minors in prison, write minors in the comments, and we will make a video for you. And we also remind you of our new channel, America vs. Europe, where we compare all European countries, the United States, and Canada under different factors. Number 1. Switzerland. We have reached the top. In first place, with a result that defies all logic, there is not a nation marked by riots or violence, but peaceful and orderly Switzerland. Did you know that despite having one of the lowest violent crime rates in Europe, Switzerland has the highest rate of youth convictions of all? The explanation for this paradox is not found in the streets, but in the courts. The Swiss system operates with a philosophy of zero tolerance. Here there is a principle of mandatory prosecution. Every offence, even a small theft, is almost always reported and brought to trial. The possibility for the police to let it go is almost non-existent. The key figure is the juvenile prosecutor, who acts as investigator, accuser, and for minor offences even as judge, issuing direct sanctions. And this is where the statistical trick reveals itself. In the Swiss system, even the lightest sanction, a simple written reprimand, or the order to perform a few hours of community service, is officially recorded as a conviction. Real imprisonment is exceptionally rare, applied in less than 2% of cases. Data on origins show a strong overrepresentation of young foreigners, connected, as elsewhere, to socio-economic factors. But what drives the numbers up is not crime. It is this highly efficient bureaucratic machine. This is how Switzerland earns first place, not because of more criminals, but because of a justice system that formalises everything. The final result is an incredible rate of 558.66 convicted minors per 100,000. And in fact, the Swiss system seems to work, since this nation is one of the 10 safest countries in Europe, as you can see in this video. We would really love to know your opinion about this situation in Europe and in your own country. That is all for this video. See you next time!